My name is Phillip Wylie. I'm a CISSP, OSCP, SANS web application. I'm the senior red team lead at a global consumer products company. I'm adjunct professor at Richland College and the founder of the Pwn School Project, which is a monthly educational meetup geared towards cybersecurity and ethical hacking. And currently we're doing 2 streams of that per month. I've been working IT and InfoSec for a little over 22 years, 6+ years as a sysadmin before I got into security. This was very important in my career, and you'll see getting into this presentation how that fits. I've been in security for a little over 16 years. I got my start in network security. Shortly after that, moved into AppSec, and that's where I got interested in pen testing and learned about pen testing. I've been pen tester for a little over 8 years, and the first 5 years were spent in consulting, which was a really great way to start out. If you have the chance to consult, you get a lot of experience in a shorter time. And I'm also a co-host along with Alyssa Miller and Chloe Mustagi on the Uncommon Journey podcast. And just kind of some things I like to share this slide because I started out as a pro wrestler, and actually during this time I wrestled a bear. But whenever I made the decision to get into a field where I had to use my mind, I'd never thought that would happen. I was always into powerlifting, played sports in high school, and never thought I'd make a living using my mind. So I got into pro wrestling for a while because some of my friends recommended it. Said, "Why don't you be a wrestler?" Got married and had to find a more stable job. Went to trade school and became a CAD draftsman. This was like '94 when I completed CAD school and got a job. And at that time, I had no exposure to computers. So as my time went on as a CAD draftsman, I found out about sysadmin roles, and that interested me. And so I taught myself how to build computers and took a Nobel netware class. And then I moved into InfoSec and then became a pen tester.
I think your slides are on your second monitor and you're presenting the PowerPoint main window.
Okay.
I just got a message about that. Sorry.
Okay.
There it is.
Okay. It's showing up okay? Okay, good.
Yep, everything's perfect. I'm so sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay.
I feel like the next slide, that's
And this is this slide here. I share this with my students each semester. This talk actually came out of my day 1 lecture for my ethical hacking class. I like to share this with students because you need to have permission, and even better, written permission when you're hacking something, when you're doing a pen test. And so this, with great power comes great responsibility. I first heard this quote in Spider-Man and then found out later on through research, I want to get the quote right, found out it was Voltaire that originally said that. And then I found out at a conference last year that it may have not been Voltaire, but at any rate, not like it's a good slide to share and a good concept to help people remember that they need to get that permission. Because you're trying to get into cybersecurity or pen testing, if you have, a criminal record, it makes it hard to get jobs. So please keep that in mind. What is pen testing? Pen testing is assessing security from an adversarial perspective, the same way a malicious hacker would do. So you're attempting to exploit vulnerabilities to gain unauthorized access to systems and sensitive data. Why pen testing? By testing the security posture from an adversary's point of view, you're able to get a better idea of the overall security. A vulnerability scanner typically only sees what's on the surface and can miss things underneath. So if you're able to hack into that surface, you may be able to find other things that you can hack into that vulnerability scans alone aren't going to detect. And exploitable vulnerabilities are higher risk and easier to justify remediation or budget for the remediation. Sometimes remediation can be very expensive, and companies may not be able to afford the budget to fix that. And so this is a way to justify that those need to be done. I've actually been on pen tests as a consultant, that the person that we were working with on the pen test would actually point out areas for us to test because their company may not listen to the recommendations. Sometimes not always the company not trusting you. Sometimes a third party coming in, validating that gives them more justification and gives them a reason to get it fixed. So this justification is one of the great things about pen testing. It's a way to, if you needed to go to another type of firewall, better endpoint protection, then a pen test sometimes can help justify that. And a lot of pen tests are required because of PCI, the payment card industry data security standards. And really, you should be securing your environment to make it secure, but compliance has driven a lot of that. A lot of pen test jobs have came out of PCI compliance. It's a fun job, and there's a lot of good opportunities. When I got started in pen testing, it was mainly consultants and contractors doing the work. And as the need for this has grown, companies be able to afford consultants to do the whole job got kind of a little unreasonable. So companies went to hiring their own pen testers. Not all companies have them, but I think more or most companies eventually will. So there's a lot of opportunity out there. Pen testing job. So when you're looking for a pen testing job, it's a good idea to know the synonyms for pen testing. So penetration tester is the full term, also known as pen testers. Security consultants, analysts, and engineers are typically what the people are doing the pen test. Their job titles. HR cannot create job titles and descriptions. There's like certain job families, and they can't go that granular. So a lot of cases, then pen testers will work under the consultant, analyst, or engineer title. So in this case, you really just need to look at the job description to see that it's a pen test job. And here's some more synonyms. So ethical hacking is what you typically hear, or white hat hackers. That's more what the general public's going to understand. Offensive security, adversarial security, and a lot of times these fall under groups like threat and vulnerability management. And sometimes threat and vulnerability management may be the vulnerability scanning team, but some companies this encompasses the pen test team as well. And there's other skills, other areas that these skills are helpful in. If you're working in a SOC, your digital forensics incident response, network security analysts and engineers, purple teams and application security, these skills can be helpful. Be able to detect and understand those attacks is very important. And kind of to show the importance of that, you have the MITRE attack framework that you heard about in the last presentation, and something you hear a lot of lately. So that kind of shows the need for the pen testing skills or the knowledge of that. Purple teams have become popular. This is where the red team and blue team work together to improve the defenses. So while a pen test is going on, a red team engagement, the red team will work with the blue team to figure out how to block certain types of attacks. In application security, through the SDLC process, application pen tests are required of some kind of vulnerability scanning. So understanding this and understanding the security risks as an AppSec engineer, you're able to better defend and remediate those issues and even test against those issues. And there's different types of targets that you will you'll test as a pen tester. Some of you may not, and some of them you will do in more detail. So networks, from the internal, external facing portion of a network to the wireless networks. Applications, including your web app, that client, mobile, and cloud are very popular areas that applications are created for now. And the security of those applications need to be tested. And then you have hardware. So your typical network hardware, your routers and switches, your Internet of Things, medical devices. These include like pacemakers, insulin pumps. These need to be secure because these are items that if they were breached, they could cause injury or even death. And kind of expanding into that realm, transportation, the autonomous vehicles, the ability for an attacker to be able to take over a vehicle, a plane or a car. These need to be assessed for the security vulnerabilities because they could be used to harm. I mean, you see a lot of the typical attacks on people are normally, physical through weapons of some sort, but this allows someone to do it remotely and makes it easier for them to get away and go uncaught. Hacking people, the social engineering aspect, as well as buildings, physical security, these are other targets of pen tests. And the different types of knowledge. So when you're doing a pen test against a target, you have the black box test, which is limited to IP addresses, more of an attacker approach. Sometimes you will just know the name of the company. It's up to the pen tester to collect network blocks, URLs, go to the physical address to try, physical attacks. And this is also applies to application too. So this is more or less, you've got the URL, you're trying to get into it like an attacker. White box is also known as crystal box. It's detailed system info, including accounts and documentation. And for applications, this is a preferred method because you're able to test on unauthenticated like an attacker would. And then you have the opportunity of testing as a user, because someone that's even an administrator, there's certain information they don't need to go get to. If you're an administrator, then you don't need to be able to see clear text information on user accounts, like their social security numbers, account numbers, and that sort of stuff. So during a white box test, you need to test the different levels of that application. In these methods, what really controls the method you use is also the amount of time. If you have a pen test that you have to have done in a short period of time, then a white box test helps make up for that, because what you're giving in information, there's not as much work to do the reconnaissance or the OSINT on that target to be able to attack into it. And then you have the gray box test, and this is kind of a combination of the two. And this is typically what you see most cases on a pen test. With the network, you have network blocks, or particular IP ranges, or the URLs for that target. So you have just enough information to test it. And vulnerability scans. This is going to kind of give you some different layers or levels of security assessments. So vulnerability scans. This is not a pen test. This is running your vulnerability scanner like Rapid7 Nexpose or Tenable Nessus, or even OpenVAS against the system to look for vulnerabilities. This only finds vulnerabilities, and this could contain false positives. So the next step of assessment is vulnerability assessments. And like the first item, it's not a pen test. What you're doing here, you're taking your vulnerability scanning and validating to make sure they're not false positives. And this also, when you get your vulnerability assessment, you're going a step further. You're running other tools, different types of port scanners and service scanners and other tools to look for vulnerabilities. And then you validate these to make sure that they are actual vulnerabilities. Because if you go on a vulnerability scan, you could go through and you miss stuff, or either find things that are not actual vulnerabilities. And so the pen test is your next level. So what we're doing here is we're taking those first two steps, and we've already validated that they're vulnerable, and we take those validated vulnerabilities and we try to exploit those. So this is what makes it a pen test. You're looking for vulnerabilities, you're validating vulnerabilities, and you're exploiting vulnerabilities. And the last step here is your red team or adversarial pen test. This is testing the blue team. This is attack simulation, less of a restrictive scope. And a lot of times you hear generically red team, blue team, but to get down in the really nuts and bolts of red teaming, this is testing as an adversarial. The people you're testing against don't always know that you're doing the test. This is a way to test the people, the processes, and the technologies, so you're able to see, is the incident response team responding? Are the devices, like the intrusion prevention devices and intrusion detection systems, actually detecting this? So this is a way for that to be accomplished. And this is kind of like where pen testing originally kind of came out of, but it got more constrictive and more narrow in scope. And there's different specializations. Your typical pen tester, just your regular pen test job, is kind of referred to as like a generalist. So you're doing network, Wi-Fi, light web app, because even though you're not specialized in web application, when you're doing a network pen test, you're going to run into different web interfaces on system tools, and so you need to understand that. So sometimes that may be your only way as a pen tester to get into something on the network. Wi-Fi is another one that sometimes is not as secure as your network layer, your wired network. And then application, this area is kind of unique because most people going into generalist pen testing are coming from IT or security. Application people are either coming in from security or application development. So really, this is, if you're an application developer and you want to get into pen testing, this is probably the best choice for you, because you have to understand that technology. And social engineering, there's people that specialize in social engineering. A good example is Jason Street and Snow, two very famous social engineers that come to mind. And physical security, testing the buildings, a lot of times this will be part of like a social engineering engagement, trying to assess the security of the building. And transportation, vehicles and airplanes, the autonomous cars. So some people specialize in this. Red team, the adversarial simulation. Some people will specialize in this area. The red teaming is going to require a little more of your physical and social engineering than other areas of pen testing. And how to become a pen tester. This is the section of the presentation most people are interested in. And part of the reason I went over my background starting out to kind of let you know what you need to do to become a pen tester. So you have to have the technology knowledge before you can secure something or hack into something. You've got to understand that technology knowledge. You've got to understand how networks work, operating systems, especially Windows and Linux, and Unix is another one that's popular to know. Windows is what typically you're running most of the time on an enterprise network, whereas Linux and Unix you may see more from an internet standpoint. And also security, you need to understand the security. Understanding security is required to be a pen tester. Understanding applications and hardware are also helpful, but these first three things here are really important. You need to understand operating systems from like a sysadmin level. If you get a command shell to a system that's Linux or Windows, if you don't understand that command line, you're going to be doing a lot of Googling. So you need to really understand that. And you also, by knowing those operating systems, you'll have a better idea how they can be exploited. And then the hacking knowledge. Once you have that technology background, you have to learn the hacking part of it. For me, this was the most difficult part. I came in from working in application security, network security, and sysadmin, but I'd run vulnerability scanners for networks and applications, but I had no idea how to hack, so I had to learn how to hack. So there's different ways you can acquire this knowledge, formal classes, you have your SANS classes, your conferences, there's some conferences, you can go to different conferences such as, this virtual conference to learn different techniques and technologies there. Meetings and meetups are good. Self-study, even no matter if you're taking classes, going to meetups and conferences, you need a home lab. There's a lot of great videos on YouTube, walkthroughs on hacking and pen testing that you can follow along with, tutorials, blogs, and articles, and Twitter. InfoSec Twitter is a rich resource of knowledge out there. There's a lot of people that are presenters, they are consultants, people that are creating O-days and exploit tools that are out there that you can get them before access to this before it goes to the conference or becomes a conference talk. So this is a lot of good information you can find there. I used to rely mostly on blogs and RSS feeds when I was getting started out, but now Twitter is one of the good ways to get that information. And I like to utilize lists. You can create lists with people you follow. So if there's certain items, you can categorize that out into smaller categories and go through and look at. So if you want to look at cloud security, then you can have some pen testers or people in cloud that you follow. So you can go through and look at those specific feeds and kind of sort through the large amount of content you can get from Twitter. In the hacker mindset, so we're talked about learning how to hack, learning how the techniques, but you have to develop that hacker mindset. The hacker mindset is the ability to think like an attacker and find ways to exploit vulnerabilities. The hacker mindset is a culmination of creative and analytical thinking. There's some areas in security that require a lot more creativity, and pen testing is one of those areas. Developing mindset is similar to troubleshooting. So once you build a PC and you're not connecting to the network, when your installs go perfect, you're not learning anything. But whenever you have the little hiccups, the problems trying to connect to the network, not getting the application to work, you've installed a Linux tool and you're missing another piece of software to get it to run, then learning how to troubleshoot. This is kind of similar to hacking. The hacker mindset takes time and repetition to develop and is best developed by hands-on hacking experience. Another reason why you want to build a lab. Just like troubleshooting, you'll realize this is causing me this problem, so I do this. And so as you learn different exploits and different vulnerabilities, You may learn that if I can upload this, I can upload this kind of shell, and that gives me shell access to the system. What I do next, and once you're on the system, escalate privileges and that sort of thing. So you kind of learn to chain that together. And this is just one of these things through doing stuff like hack the box and working on vulnerable VMs will help you develop that skill set. In the Pentester blueprint formula is technology knowledge, security knowledge, and the hacker mindset. So you have to understand the technology before you can, secure it and before you can hack into it. So knowing these three areas are very important. And the thing about this is, this is a marathon, not a sprint. So you take your time learning the materials, because what happens if you get in too big of a hurry, then you don't remember some items, and then you have to go back and look that up and relearn it. So take your time and thoroughly understand it. Understand the basics. I mean, even if you've been in IT for a while, it's always good to review things. And where do you start? Okay. So you need to develop a plan. You need to fill in the gaps. So if you have no IT experience, then start with the basics: operating systems, hardware, and networking. Think like A+, like the CompTIA A+ certification track. Think along those lines and start learning those elements. If you have IT experience, then learn Linux and security and networking. You may be working in one of those areas, but if you don't have one of those areas, work on it and learn it better. You need to learn the operating systems at a sysadmin level. InfoSec experience. So if you have InfoSec experience, this is putting you a little closer to having that foundation you need to start learning to be a pen tester. This can be done by filling in the gaps. Fill in the gaps, anything you're missing. Start learning pen testing and hacking. Participate in CTFs and bug bounties. Bug bounties are a good way to learn legally in an environment where you're testing production systems. So your experience here is something that you can use on an interview. You can explain this to potential employers on an interview. You can tell them how you exploited a SQL injection vulnerability, and just understanding how, describing your methodology. This is a good way to explain. And working in these test environments, CTFs, labs, and bug bounties are a way to get this experience. And I'll mention this again, everyone build a lab, no matter what level you're at. It's good to have a lab environment. In the lab setup, so there's three categories here, and there's like all different levels of this. The minimalist is kind of your starter lab, and this is where you have everything on one system. On your desktop or your laptop, you've got your virtualization going, you've got an attack VM, you've got vulnerable VMs running on there. You can use anything like VMware, VirtualBox hypervisor. VirtualBox is a really good, inexpensive platform to use, and it runs on Linux, Windows, and Mac. And a dedicated lab, this is where you break down separate systems, where you have your attack system, and then you can have multiple systems running vulnerable VMs, or you can have actual bare metal systems running the operating system with vulnerable applications and vulnerable configurations. And then advanced labs, you can get more, this is where you get more advanced and a little more granular with your lab. So you've got your servers, like desktop computers and routers and switches connecting, and a firewall. So you can even have like a firewall, segmenting these off and practice hacking through there. But a word of advice: when you're building your lab, if you're really needing to learn this in a relatively quick manner, this kind of goes against me telling you take your time, but you really can spend a lot of time troubleshooting your lab if you get too elaborate. This is, if you're just getting started out, an advanced lab may be a good way to learn networking. But one of the things you have to realize is, you have to be careful, because if you get it too advanced, you can spend more time troubleshooting your lab. Early in my IT journey, I taught myself web development, and I hosted my customer websites on a server at home. And one of the things I ran into by hosting at home was whenever a system would break, I had a hard drive fail, I was rebuilding a system instead of building a website, which was actually paying me money. So this is something to keep in mind. And you're gonna have to have your attack platform. And some of these you've probably heard of: Kali Linux and Parrot OS. These are two very common Linux distributions. Ubuntu with the Pentester framework from TrustedSec. They've got a script that's called the Pentester framework, and you can install this in Ubuntu and install the different tools like you would on Kali Linux. And you're also, I would even if you're going the Linux route, I would set up a Windows VM with Commando VM. It's a script by FireEye that you can install the different hacking tools, pen testing tools, because sometimes pen testing a Windows environment works better on a Windows platform. Kind of in the beginning, people used Windows a lot more commonly, but when Backtrack Linux came out, the predecessor to Kali Linux, a lot of people started moving to Linux distributions because a lot of the tools were written in Linux, but it's kind of good to be fluent on both of those platforms. And one of them, if you're running a vulnerability scan on one, then you can be testing other tools. And so it's really good to have more than one of those VMs. One of my consulting days and currently working for my employer, I have an environment of each set up. A home lab target. So we've got the TAC platform. You pick out your favorite distribution, the one you want to try out. And I advise you to try out the different ones to see what you like best. So you can create your own virtual VMs. So you can download targets from VulnHub. Two very good ones to start with is Metasploitable 2 and Metasploitable 3. Metasploitable 3, there's a little more configuration to that. Metasploitable 2, you're able to download a VM and set that up. Metasploitable 3 offers like a Windows option, so you have a Windows testing target. These are two good options to start with because they have a lot of different vulnerabilities on there to exploit. So, one of these VMs of Metasploitable could be equivalent to 2 or 3 other vulnerable VMs. And also it's created from a trusted source too. So sometimes you have to be careful on things you download from the internet. OWASP WebCoat, Juice Shop, Damn Vulnerable Web App. Those are some other vulnerable apps that you can download and install. And create your own VM with targets. You can get the software from ExploitDB. You can go out and look for different vulnerable versions of software and download that. So if you wanted to try out a certain kind of exploit, you could download the vulnerable version, install it in your lab, and set it up. And recommended reading. So here's some books I recommend getting started out. The Penetration Testing, a Hands-On Guide to Hacking from Georgia Weidman. I highly recommend that book. It was the book for my class the first year. I was teaching an ethical hacking class, but we went to the Pentest Plus because it gave students a certification to prepare for. And we had a lot of CompTIA content in our program, cybersecurity program. And after you go through the nice thing about that book is it takes you through building a home lab. So you can set up your own vulnerable VMs and test against those, as well as you're learning pen test along the way. The Hacker's Playbook 2 and 3, this is like the next step. The Hacker Playbook 2, I would start with that. And there is a difference. Some versions of books, it's just newer attacks, newer techniques and that type of thing. But with these two books, the main difference is version 3 gets more into red teaming. So you're getting into more adversarial simulation, which is a good book. I would start out with the version 2 and then go to version 3. And then if you're more interested in web application pen testing, the Web Application Hacker's Handbook, Discovering and Exploiting Security Flaws, version 2, that is a really good book to have. I use that for my ethical hacking, for my web app pen testing class. And one of the authors of this book is one of the creators of Portswigger's Burp Suite, which is a popular industry standard tool for doing web application pen tests. And the Red Team Field Manual, this is a good book with little short command line syntax for anything from Windows, Linux, different pen testing tools. So this is a good handy reference to have. And here are some learning resources. And I've got this separated out by, you'll see that there's a little more space in the middle, separating out from like paid courses to free courses. In SANS Institute, they have some really good courses. I've taken several courses through them. It's created by industry standards, usually people that have worked in consulting, and people, a lot of people here create different hacking techniques and tools and stuff. So this really sharp minds behind that. And those are typically something that your employer, you need your employer to pay for because it's like a $7,000 course. And then also there's eLearn Security. eLearn Security is a good place to start. Some of the first courses I took when I was getting started was I took eLearn Security's web app pen testing course, as well as their mobile app pen testing course, because I got into some mobile application testing. And they're really good courses, and they have a lab set up there. And there's a certification that comes along with it that requires you to complete a pen test to get that certification. And then there's virtual hacking labs. If you're interested in OSCP, this is a good area to start with. Virtual hacking labs has a course, so they give you a PDF or online learning content that teaches you how to pen test different hacking techniques. And they have a lab, and the lab you access through a VPN, kind of like you do the OSCP labs. And they have different levels of complexity, and it will tell you the difficulty level of each system. And the easier the system, the more information they give you on that system. As it gets more difficult, they give you less hints. So they're kind of training you, you start out here, and as you get more advanced, you should be learning these items, and they take off the training wheels. And some courses like, the OSCP course, they kind of start off, they don't give you the hints and stuff. It's all up to you to try. With this, they kind of ease you into it. So this is a good course to start out with when preparing for the OSCP. And then Pentester Academy, this is a great resource. It was SecurityTube when I started out. They've got lots of good content on Windows, Linux, wireless. They have a really great online lab, attack and defense labs, that comes with your subscription, that has different targets to pen test against. They've got like an online CTF. They've got like some hardware related challenges and stuff. So it's a really good place to learn. They have courses like JavaScript for pen testers and that sort of stuff. So that's a really good course. And Pentester Lab, this is a great one for web app pen testers. They have different online challenges and virtual online labs that you can work against, or download ISOs in some cases and set them up on your machine. And this takes you through vulnerabilities in web application that actually will land you a shell. You're able to get past something besides a cross-site scripting or something that exposes information. They go into detail of actually getting command line access to a system. And the last one of the paid content here is Practical Pen Test Labs. This one, last time I looked, was like $64. You have VPN access to that lab. There's a free version, but $64 is for lifetime access. It's mainly Linux systems, but you're able to access it through a VPN, and it's a really good way to learn Linux security. And then you get into we got into our free content here, Bugcrowd University and Hacker 101. These are good areas there to learn. They got videos up and information on how to perform certain types of web application vulnerability attacks and how to test for those vulnerabilities. And HackerOne even goes into, they've got an online CTF that helps teach you the skills needed to be a web app pen tester or a bug bounty hunter. And then you got the SANS pen test blog. If you go there, there's a lot of good information on cheat sheets on how to use Metasploit or Nmap. And then there's hacking tutorials. Hacking tutorials was created by the people that bring you the virtual hacking labs. They've got like different tutorials on how to use OpenVAS, Nmap, Metasploit, different hacking tools. And then there's cyber.it. Although cyber.it is not completely free, they've got some really good courses on pen testing. The advanced pen testing course was created by Georgia Weidman, that wrote the book, pen testing book. So that's a really good place to start out. There's videos. I used to use that as part of my course content, because the students could read the book and then see some videos related to those chapters online. And Web Security Academy, this is created by Portswigger, the people that create the tool Burp Suite. This is a complete online free source. It's actually taking the place of the Web Application Hacker's Handbook. Instead of updating the book, they used to have like a companion site that you could pay for free online access, training access. Now they've got this online content that's really, when I started out, there was like using it last spring of last year for my web app pen testing class. There was like 5 of the main type of vulnerabilities like cross-site scripting and SQL injection on there that you could learn about and had labs for. Now it's gotten very extensive. It's gone from it's gone from anywhere from kind of more entry-level stuff and graduates you up to more complex kind of stuff. So it's a really good lab. So it's all online, so you're able to access that using Burp Suite to test against those items. Most of the content on there, I believe you can use the free version of Burp Suite, but some of the more complex stuff, it's good to have the pro version of Burp Suite. And then OWASP, Open Web Application Security project. They're the creators of OWASP Zap, a web application vulnerability testing tool. That's kind of the competitor to Burp Suite. They've got like links to vulnerable applications, vulnerable VMs, links to the OWASP testing guide, the OWASP top 10. If you're going to get into web app pen testing, I highly recommend going over the OWASP top 10 and going through the OWASP testing guide, because this is kind of gives you a way to test applications. So kind of way to get started. And hackthebox.com, hackthebox.eu. This is a really good tool for CTFs. There's like a list of them out there. TJ Null has a list of VMs that are similar to some of the OSCP VMs. That's a really good resource there. And then over the wire CTF, this is a really good place. They got several different CTFs, and there are good ways to learn like Linux security on there, some of the basic security stuff, because when people are going through learning an operating system, they may get bored, but learning the security through this is interesting because it shows you how you can exploit those vulnerabilities. And for a link of this, the recording of this will be available, but as far as like slides and stuff, there's a link on the bottom of this page to my website, the Hacker Maker. If you go to learning-resources, that will give you these resources and a link to those learning resources online, so you don't have to copy and paste. The links are out there, or worry about taking screenshots of this slide. And certifications, this is a very common one. As most of you know, a lot of times you're getting started out in security or any area of IT, sometimes certifications can help you get your foot in the door. And the entry-level certifications that I have listed here is the CEH, where most people are familiar with that. It's through EC Council, and then there's the Pentest Plus through CompTIA. The EC Council cert, the Certified Ethical Hacker, it's kind of like the CISSP. It's a DoD certification, so companies that are doing business with the government a lot of times look for people with a CEH or a CISSP. So these are kind of good to know. When I was working in consulting, we were trying to get a contract for some government work, and they were asking some of us to get a CEH so they could qualify for the bid. Pentest Plus is a newer one, but the thing I really like about the Pentest Plus compared to the CEH gets more into the tools and how to use them. Pentest Plus is really deep in methodology, and that's one of the reasons I really like this course and went to that for my training materials for my class. And then you get into the intermediate ones. The entry level back on that, the CEH, you're even outside of DoD stuff, a lot of management is familiar and HR are familiar with the CEH since it's been around longer than a lot of the other certifications. So sometimes this will get your foot in the door. Your intermediate certs that we got listed here, these are the ones that usually when you're looking at pen test jobs, they want you to have one of these two certifications or the last two in the advanced, the GPEN by SANS or the OSCP from Offensive Security. The GPEN is question and answer. You may have to look at screens where you got certain tools and they tell you what selections or to answer the questions based on tool output. Whereas the OSCP, you have to conduct a pen test. So you've got like 5 systems that you have to hack into. You've got, they say 24 hours, so you got like 23 hours and 45 minutes to complete the pen test. Then you have another 24 hours to complete the pen test report and turn that in. So there you're actually getting to do a pen test. I got a job one time without the technical interview where they would have candidates hack into a VM or pen test a VM to make sure to show their skills. And since I had the OSCP, the employer said that since I had that there was no need to do that part of the interview. And then, like I mentioned, the advanced, you have these advanced certs, so they're going to advanced pen testing techniques like the SANS GXPN. It's exploit development and advanced pen testing, and the OSCE from Offensive Security covers similar items. Although OSCE, you have the same situation as the OSCP. You have actual items that you have to exploit. You have to write exploit code, and you've got 48 hours with this exam. Although one is more complex as far as you actually have to do hands-on exploitation and hacking, the SANS offerings are highly asked for. They know the training is really solid in that. So these are really good options. The OSCP I've done, and that was one course that I've learned a lot. I learned the most about hacking. That's when I got into pen testing, I need to learn how to hack. I use that. And also not listed on here, there's some eLearn security certifications. They're starting to gain more notoriety in the industry, becoming more recognized, and they offer good training content. So I think that those will pick up popularity as time goes on and as people find out more about their education. Job tips. So professional networking. So get involved in the community, go out to conferences, conferences, meetups. We're lucky in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that we have Dallas Hackers Association, Pwn School, local DEF CON group, OWASP chapter. So getting involved in those, just making those contacts, because that professional networking will help you get referred to jobs. My last 3 full-time jobs have been through referrals. Jobs that I really wasn't even looking for jobs, someone came up to me and approached me about the job. So this is one of the big reasons for networking. And then LinkedIn. LinkedIn is your online resume. This is how people find you. If they're searching for pen testers or whatever area in security you're in, if you have that content in your LinkedIn profile, then this is going to come up in recruiters and they'll find you. Make sure to just populate this like a resume. Some people will just put the name of the company, maybe a title. Give details. Don't reveal information that someone could use to social engineer your company to hack it. So, but put in the type of skills that you have, populate this like a resume. And also it's not LinkedIn or Facebook. So make sure that you keep it professional. Some interview tips: prepare for the interview before you go in. Even if your experience is always good to brush up, look over the OWASP top 10, familiarize yourself with things that you may have forgot about. Be able to explain the basics like the 3-way TCP handshake and the OSI model. And as far as the interview questions, OWASP top 10, no matter what kind of pen testing job it is, usually you're going to get asked about a vulnerability related to the OWASP top 10. And when you're writing your resume, make sure that you are including things that you actually know. If you just open Burp Suite up, I wouldn't put that on your resume. If you understand it, you've worked with it, you got actual experience, list it. Because when you write your resume or your LinkedIn profile, what you're doing is you're helping the interviewer create their questions for your interview. So they go through, they're going to look at stuff on your resume and they're going to ask you about it to make sure you know it. So that's a big one. I've interviewed people before that have come in and put things on a resume that they really didn't understand that well. And it also, questions your ethics and honesty too, if you put things on there that you can't answer. And on the screen here, you can see my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me. How I got into teaching was through mentoring. Over the years, I helped people that were interested in getting into pen testing, sharing information with them. My Twitter is on here, as well as my email and my website, and a link for the Pwn School project. We have our meetup links on there, so you can find out when we're having our meetings, as well as I post that on Twitter. And if anyone's interested in classes, my class is wrapping up for the semester, but they'll start back up in the fall. I teach ethical hacking and web app pen testing springs and fall at Richland College. And check out the Uncommon Journey podcast too, if you get a chance. So that concludes my presentation. Do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. Thank you so much. That was awesome. We had a lot of engagement during your talk too, people asking questions, and you answered a lot of them during your talk, which is super cool. So I really like this question, and I think it's a good one. Somebody's asking, you mentioned that you switched from network security to app security. What made you switch?
Where it really switched is it really wasn't my choice, which I feel like I was fortunate for that to happen. In our security group, we had, this is back in 2004 when I moved into security, everyone was doing firewall intrusion detection, and we'd do some network vulnerability scans, maybe some risk assessments. That was it. In 2005, we hired a CISO, and when the chief information security officer came into the company, he divided us up into separate groups, separate silos. So I got moved into application security. And the good thing about that is that's where I got my interest in pen testing, from using vulnerability scanners, uh, going to different little talks and stuff offered by some different consulting companies and that type of thing. So that's what got me interested in pen testing. So that was, if it wasn't for that, I don't know that I'd went down that trail, but I'm really glad that it worked out that way.
Awesome. Let me pull up my notes here. One of the other questions we saw that I think is a good one is, would it be helpful to have a role kind of like a sysadmin first to build up good foundational skills before trying to transition to a pen test role?
Definitely, and that's part of the reason I like to share my background, because I started as a sysadmin, and sometimes people like myself take for granted because you did that. But then when I go back and look at things, and when I was going through the OSCP, understanding the command line, when I got a shell to one of the systems on the offensive security network, I was able to shut down firewalls because I knew the commands and stuff. So yeah, that sysadmin background really helps. Otherwise, you could do those things through a school, which a college course compared to hands-on is usually not as good. But yeah, definitely start out as a sysadmin. Take your time doing this. You don't have to, this could be your end goal, but the better you prepare for your end goal, the more successful you're going to be. If you're unprepared and you get into it, you may have a bad experience and decide this is not what you wanted to do. So preparing up front is good. I mean, doing sysadmin for a while, even doing, some sort of security before getting into pen testing. And some other areas too that companies have, they have a vulnerability scanning team, which is usually in threat and vulnerability management. So, your next progression could be like being on the vulnerability scanning or remediation team.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's so true. I've seen a lot of people kind of make a similar transition where they go from some kind of sysadmin role or support role into a pen test or more of offensive security roles, because you have spent so much time fixing things, you understand how they break.
Yes.
And how you can take advantage of that.
Honestly, and another prime example was a friend of mine that I knew when I was working at my past employer. We needed a pen tester on our team. And because one of the guys on our team came from a sysadmin background and was good, picked up pen testing well, I knew this friend of mine would be good because he was an awesome sysadmin. So that's part of the thing of being a hack, ethical hacker or pen tester. You got to understand the technology to break into it. So, if you're trying to be a pen tester from the start, you've got to learn all that plus the pen testing piece. And be patient, take your time, don't rush into it. The more, some people can jump. I know people that have their first IT or security job was pen testing and they did well. But for me, that wouldn't have worked. I needed the time to spend doing sysadmin and security before I got into pen testing.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see here. We had a question. Where'd it go? So somebody's asking if you know anything about pen test of medical devices and what the threats are there. Do you have any experience with that, or any thoughts?
That I haven't had a lot of experience with, although I did a pen test. This just kind of showed the importance of that. Is I've done wireless pen tests for hospitals before where medical devices were on the network. In a live production hospital, you can't test those items. And actually, one of the wireless pen tests I was doing, we decided the customer wasn't comfortable with anything outside of, of course, I wasn't going to exploit a medical device, but was really worried about any exploitation. So we revised the assessment to be where I was going to do my scans, run my tools to collect information, and then do like check the security configurations of the different wireless devices and controllers. But yeah, and also did a pen test for a company that made medical devices. So that's one of the areas that if you want to get into that area, then you need to understand the hardware hacking. So things like you'd learn for IoT, be able to dump, the firmware and audit the firmware, look for vulnerabilities that way. So yeah, you'd want to learn. And there's jobs where people, that's what they do, is they test the security of devices. It may not be medical devices alone. It could be, consumer grade routers or commercial network equipment. And going past the point of just testing the network layer or testing on the wire, they also dump like firmware and look for vulnerabilities that way. So understanding, reverse engineering, understanding hardware hacking, those are really good things to learn for that area. And the thing is, you get a good base on that, base knowledge on those different things, learn hardware and wireless, then once you know, it's easier to pick up other areas. So if you know IoT, then switching over to test something like industrial controls and SCADA is not as much of a reach. You've got a little of the basics to test those items.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think that kind of that definitely answers some of the other questions that we have here. They're very similar in that it's how do I get into pen testing? And it, like you're saying, it's learning how the things work
Yeah.
a lot of the time.
And one thing I'd like to add, that when I mentioned the certifications that I didn't, is don't go out there and just get the cert, know the cert. Because one of the things you're doing too is if you do it just to get your foot in the door, then you make the certification look bad and you make it hard for other people. Make sure you understand it. And then if you understand and know that content when you're taking the exam, whether it's like offensive security or e-learn security, where it's actual hands-on exam where you do a pen test or question and answer, understand it. If you understand the content, it's going to make the exam experience a lot better.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really important as well. Don't just study to pass the test. Study to understand what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I know people like TinkerSec. He's like one of the really good pen tester, one of the best I know. And the guy has he's never taken a certification based course. He took like some, he did like Professor Messer videos starting out, but he doesn't have OSCP or SANS cert, any of that stuff. He just learned on his own. So you can learn on your own.
Yeah, definitely. People in Discord have talked about that. They're asking about certs and that sort of thing, and conversation revolving around some of those free resources that are out there, because there are so many good free resources to get that hands-on experience and practice these skills in a safe environment, where you can also find walkthroughs and learn that way, and then go back and try it again yourself. I have done that personally. I found it really useful.
That is a very useful method, and with walkthroughs, not everyone's going to do it the same. People use different tools. And so a lot of times, people are going through vulnerable VMs or hack the box VMs, they don't want to cheat. But the thing is, if you get hung up, walkthroughs can be helpful. And when you're starting out, just even going through watching walkthroughs to get an idea ways to attack these things. And there you can either find that through YouTube videos or written walkthroughs, and those are very, very helpful. Good points.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anybody, if you're looking for resources on that, these slides will be posted. And yeah, thank you again. Thank you so much for this. I really enjoy this talk. It's one I've seen before, and I'm so happy that you submitted. It's a great talk for people who really are interested in getting started in pen testing and how they need to get rolling.
This is the perfect venue for the talk, and I really like the whole theme of your talk, the intro to SecCon, because there's too many conferences that they really overlook the people trying to get into it. And the thing is people trying to get into security don't mean that you're totally new to technology. You could have worked in IT, but there needs to be more resources to help people trying to get in, help them make an informed decision.